Scam artists don't want you to listen. You're tuned in to Trust Dale Radio. Here's your consumer investigator, Dale Cardwell.
Hey, everybody. I promised an interesting subject, and before the break I said it's what no one really wants to talk about, but everybody loves to listen in on.
Yeah.
And so what we're talking about today is divorce. And we're going to be talking about not just divorce, but mediation. Because a big part of what we do at Trust Dale Radio is to mediate disputes between consumers and businesses. However, mediation can be a very useful tool in a variety of conflicts, including divorce. Now, buddy, we're not going to start mediating divorce.
No, we're not.
That's not going to happen. I'm going to leave that. I'm going to leave that to the experts.
That's why we got the expert with us.
Joining us now to talk about what mediation is and how it can help resolve problems is Lee Meriwether of Meriwether and Tharp, a Trust Dale partner that specializes in family law. Welcome, Lee.
Thanks for having me.
It's wonderful to have you in the studio. I love having you in the studio.
He does a great job.
So people don't think about that, but you've kind of got to be an expert in mediation, don't you?
You do. And if you really want to help people resolve cases, which is our big focus, you have to understand how mediation works and how you can use it to avoid trial so that we can resolve the divorce without protracted litigation.
Yeah. And so I find that I encounter people that have a particular mindset, a perspective, and it's really hard for them to see another perspective. And I bet you run into that a lot.
We do. And a lot of times the whole process about mediation is an education process. So a lot of people don't understand what mediation really is. And it's just an opportunity for everybody to get together under one roof and talk about a way to resolve their situation, a way to, in a divorce context, how to divide up the property, the liabilities, if there's kids involved, how to come up with a way that works for the parents and the children. Because what people don't think about in this context, when you walk into a courtroom, you're in front of a third-party judge, and it's their job to make the decisions, but they don't know all the details or the nuances of your particular life. And so as soon as you take out of your hands and hand it to a third party who only has a few hours with you, he or she, the judge, doesn't have the time to figure out what is your work schedule like and what is your wife's work schedule like. In mediation, you have control of that process. The two of you can work together to come up with a resolution that works for both of you.
So how do you set up the ground rules of mediation? Describe what it is.
So mediation, it's in Georgia particularly, and other states have it too, but it's something that's ordered. Mediation is available in every state, as far as I understand, in the United States. And it's either something that the parties can agree to, or it's ordered by the court. And you can either do it with lawyers or without, and there is a third-party neutral, and they're called a mediator. They're trained here in Georgia. They're trained. They have 40 hours of training just to become a normal mediator to mediate civil disputes. And then the domestic mediation is another 40 hours of training, and then they have to observe so many divorce mediations. And their role is to be neutral. They're not there to decide the case. They're there to get party A and party B. Let's say they're 10 feet apart on their settlement. It's to get them to come to a 5, each of them. So they're a good mediation is one that either both sides are happy or both sides are equally unhappy.
Buddy, have you ever attended a mediation?
I have.
I have too.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
It is.
If it weren't painful, it would be even more fascinating.
Well, it could be very productive.
It can be, because, Lee, the role of the mediator, and you're the expert here, but the role of the mediator is to leave the room or the day with a success, right?
Yes.
And so sometimes there's a lot of psychology going on.
There is.
And that's the thing that fascinates me. You've got a hot head on one side and you've got a pleasant person on the other. Well, I would think that I'd want to take, especially if I represented the pleasant person, I would want, or if I'm the mediator, I would tend to emotionally want to help that person. But you have to separate yourself from that, don't you? Because
you really do. Because the mediators, a lot of times mediators are lawyers. They don't have to be, but a lot of them are. And they understand that if they suddenly start look like they're picking sides, the mediation is going to fail.
Right.
Or, there are situations where they can craft a settlement agreement, but the other side just feels like they were treated unfairly, and then all of a sudden you start litigating that agreement later on, or there's a modification of it later on. So the mediator is really trying to work both parties towards something that they can equally feel a certain level of satisfaction or dissatisfaction with.
I've heard that said many times.
Well, it's funny, the concept of negotiation, you were saying, Dale, that, when you ask for something, that's what you want.
Yeah.
Which is not what most people do. And I'm sure
That's right.
Lee can, attest to people generally asking for more than they want and hoping they get. And I think that's a job of a mediator, is to understand that concept.
I stink at that, Lee. I mean, I am a black and white, what you see is what you get. Here's how much it costs. And the reason it costs this much is because it's relevant to my costs. And then I've learned the hard way that there are people out there that say, well, I'm going to ask for 3 times as much because I will wind up getting twice as much. Yep. And I'm like, that's just not the way my brain works.
And the nice thing about a good mediator is that when they get to sort of know the rooms, because mediations usually start off with everybody in the same room, unless there's been some form of family violence, and then they'll usually will start in separate rooms.
Yeah.
But the mediator will start in the same room, and then they'll break into caucuses, and the mediator will move back and forth between the rooms, and they get a really good feel for the different rooms. And what's nice about mediation is, and I'm going to take a step out, some people get worried about the cost of mediation because you do have to pay for the mediator. But usually that mediator is saving everybody costs because the mediator's in room A, and they're getting a feel of what the top priority for that person in that room is. And in the other room, they're getting a feel of what their top priority is. And sometimes they're not the same. And again, we're in a divorce context, so perhaps in room A, the top priority is I want to have as much time with my children. And in the other room, it's I need as much child support as possible. And so they realize that, hey, look, if I give person A a little bit more parenting time and person B a little bit more child support, I can work a deal out. And so they actually can increase the speed of the settlement process because they find out each person's crucial points.
You're looking for the hot buttons.
Right.
So, buddy, if I didn't do what I do today, I could do that. Because it would be kind of like, because we do it, but it takes a while sometimes. It takes days, it takes weeks. This is a process that generally is supposed to, the goal is to do it in a day, right?
Right, yes.
Wow, can you imagine how intense that is? Mm-hmm. And especially with something like dividing property that so many emotions are tied into.
Well, get into the kids and the puppy, and
So should you have an attorney at mediation, or what are your thoughts?
Well, first off to say, you don't have to. But I usually recommend that you do have a lawyer there. Because the mediator is a neutral, they can't give legal advice. They can do what's called reality checking, meaning they can say, do you look at a situation, do you think that that's really the best situation? You're asking for $3,000 a month in alimony, and he's only bringing home $2,500. I'm not sure that's a good place to start. So they can do reality, but they can't give legal advice. And whenever you're in that context of where you can be, whatever the agreement you entered into in the mediation, it ultimately becomes a court order that can be compelled by contempt from the court. So the court has the power to enforce its orders through a motion for contempt. So you want a lawyer in there to make sure you're making a wise decision with whatever you agree to.
Makes complete sense. And as you alluded to earlier, this could save you a fortune in legal expenses.
Yes.
That's the goal, because it's not fun to pay a mediator, but it can wind up saving you a whole lot of money. So let's get into this a little bit. It starts out, you often start out in the same room unless if it's a family law issue, if there's abuse involved, you don't.
Correct.
You have an opening discussion, right?
Yes.
Okay, and so the mediator, the parties introduced each other, and there's an opening statement from both sides.
Right.
Okay, so Lee Meriwether is our expert today from Meriwether and Tharp. Obviously one of the top family law practices in the Southeast, is sharing his time with us today to talk about mediation, because I strongly recommend mediation.
Oh, yeah.
You know, a lot of people, Lee, we do a lot of mediation between consumers and businesses, and the consumers are so angry. Mm-hmm. And I said, look, if you maintain your position of anger, you're going to wind up losing value. If you will just back off the anger and focus on the value, it's going to save you money down the road.
Big time.
Yeah, but I generally don't get it all done in one day,
Well,
buddy.
It's funny. You said you wish this was something you could do. It is what you do.
It is, but I love the intensity of doing it in a short period of time. We'll be right back.
fighting for you and finding solutions. This is Trust Dale Radio. Your consumer investigator, Dale Cardwell.
Hey, everybody. If you're listening today by accident or by intention, you've lucked up because it's a fascinating subject. We're here with Lee Meriwether of Meriwether and Tharp, family law attorneys. But today we're focusing on mediation. And I was telling Lee during the break, if I didn't do trustdale.com, which we do a lot of mediation,
yes,
I would love to be a mediator because it's just fascinating to be in a room with people that are polar opposites, but you've got to drive toward a conclusion. And so let's continue with this, Lee. What actually happens at mediation?
Okay, so like you laid the groundwork that you all start in the same room. The mediator starts and explains the rules of the jurisdiction that they're in, and most of the situations, a mediation is a confidential process, meaning that whatever's said in mediation cannot be used against you later in court. So if you concede certain points in mediation, it won't be used against you. And so that's a huge relief for most people that are in there. And the mediator explains that whole process, and then each side gives an opening statement. And the opening statement really is not to persuade the mediator. It's really to explain to the mediator, here are the issues that are in front of you today. Here's where we expect to have some problems, and here's where we really need your help. And so it's important if you're a person who's going through that mediation process to pull emotion out of the equation and just state the facts. Here are the facts. Don't point fingers. Don't sling mud. That's not where this purpose is, because as soon as you start raising the emotion in the room, you could be tanking your mediation.
Yeah.
And so typically if the mediator is confused or wants some clarification while everybody's still in the room, the mediator will ask questions to make sure, okay, am I getting the entire picture here? Are these all the issues? Do we all agree? Okay, great. Well, let me start with, and the mediator either will start with a person that filed the divorce, or if it's a normal civil suit, who filed the civil suit, or where there's an outstanding settlement proposal. So let's say the defendant or the plaintiff had made an offer before mediation, and the defendant had that offer, then the mediator will start with the defendant or the respondent to get a counter offer to keep the process moving along.
Okay, and there are also generally written statements exchanged, at least the ones not family law. What about family law?
Okay, so, and that depends.
Okay.
Like in Florida, we do them a lot. Sometimes we have modifications of these mediation variants called late case evaluations and judicially hosted settlement conferences here in Georgia. A little bit different, but very similar. In those situations, there is a sort of a confidential mediation statement given to the mediator in advance. But a lot of the mediations, especially the ones where there are limited funds, there is not one done. So there is no exchange early on. But it's more common in the civil practice than the domestic practice.
Got it. What's the best way to prepare for mediation?
Okay, great question. All right, so there's 3 overriding things that you need to keep in mind. One is be prepared emotionally. And that means you need to be prepared to if you're angry, to sort of let that go for this mediation. You need to be willing to swallow your pride if you're prideful. You need to be, if you're depressed about something, angry about something, try to work it out before that mediation. You don't want to bring that into the mediation because that could be a hindrance. You need to be prepared intellectually. And that means if you're bringing a lawyer, listen to your lawyer. You're paying them. They're an expert. They've gone through this process. Listen to the mediator. If the mediator's reality checking you on something, then it's something you should be paying attention to. So those two, combine the emotion, the intelligent preparation. It's more of a mindset, or it is a mindset, that I'm coming here to resolve my case. In court, it's all or nothing. I'm here to win.
Yeah.
In mediation, it's resolution. Okay. And then the last thing is be prepared, sort of with your documents. So many mediations fail because you'll show up to mediation and you'll say, well, we've got a house to divide and we have a mortgage on it. Okay, great. Well, how much is the house worth? Well, I'm not really sure. Well, what's the outstanding mortgage? Not really sure. What about the credit cards? Are there credit cards? Yeah, there's 3 credit cards. What's the outstanding debt? Well, I'm not really sure. And so all of a sudden you're paying 2 lawyers and a mediator to figure out what the things are.
Yeah.
So it's critical for a successful mediation to come to mediation prepared with all of your documents.
Lee, does the same rule apply in mediation? Don't ask a question you don't know the answer to?
No, it doesn't, because it's a confidential process.
Right.
So, and in fact, that is the environment where you do want to ask those questions.
Got it.
and sometimes from a lawyer standpoint, if a client is in a room caucusing with the mediator, so going back to that whole mediation process, after you do the whole opening statement, the mediator breaks into rooms and caucuses individually. And so if a client asks a question inside that room with the mediator, that is confidential too. So if they raise an issue that you don't want the other side to know just yet, you ask the mediator to keep it confidential. So it stays inside that room.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So even if you feel like mediation's not going well, Lee, what can you do to make sure you get something useful out of the mediation?
So one of the important factors, one of the things I like to use mediation for is sometimes cases aren't resolving, and I don't really know why. And maybe there's a motion caught in the middle, so that when we ask, why is this settlement not acceptable, and the other person can't vocalize it. Maybe it's because the settlement proposal came from, I'll just pick on the husband for a minute. So if I represented the wife, I made a proposal to the husband, and he just didn't like it because it came from me. But when you get a mediator in the room, the mediator sort of diffuses that emotion. They're there as it's almost like they're making the offer instead of me personally making the offer or my client making the offer.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So one of the cool things about Meriwether and Tharp, and part of the reason that we work together, is because of the approach that you guys take to family law, to divorce. You want to keep people together, but you recognize there's a reality when it's time to go your separate ways. But what if you're in the room with one of and the husband's in the room with one of those firms that's like scorched earth? That they're talking about, we're going to get every last penny. Does that have an impact emotionally on the husband or on the wife? Have you seen that happen?
Or the mediator?
Yeah,
it does. And so again, where I was going on this. Sorry, it's taking so long. Where I was going with that point applies there too. So you try to use the mediator. I try to use the mediator to find out what's really going on the other side.
Yeah.
And so I ask, why did they make this settlement proposal? Rather than getting angry, because usually that's their first response to your client. When you get an offer they don't like, they get upset. I'm like, wait, don't get upset. Why is it they're making this offer? Why do they think this is fair? Why do they think this is reasonable? Why do you think this is a good idea for the kids? If the husband's traveling 50% of the time, why should he have primary custody of the children? Those kind of questions. And so the mediator goes back. And usually, sometimes they'll actually get a reasonable answer. A lot of times they're like, he's just angry. And we go, okay, well, we know how to deal with the rest of the case.
Yeah. So if mediation fails, does that mean you have to go to trial?
No, not necessarily. So I've had a lot of cases where the mediation failed, but it opened the door. Going back to, we found out the reason why the other side didn't want to settle. There was some concern about our client or some behavior that our client maybe exhibited during the marriage that they hadn't done in a long time, but it was an irrational fear. And we're able to address it in a subsequent settlement proposal that results in settlement. So there's a lot of times mediation is the first step to discussing settlement, and then it results in a settlement before you go to trial. And I've even had some cases where we had 3 separate mediations, and the only reason we stopped them, so one of them we got in there, and they started getting in a fight over the value of a house. I thought we had an agreement on it before we walked in there because we always try to do that, but suddenly the other side thought it was worth much more. But the mediator did a smart thing. He said, look, I don't want to waste your time. Let's pause this mediation, come back in 2 weeks, and then we'll have the amount at the end. And so we spent the time and money to figure out the correct data set and then came back and settled the case.
Cool. Okay. I cannot believe we're out of time.
I know it goes by so fast.
Lee, how do people find Meriwether and Tharp?
Well, on your website for sure, and also at mtlawoffice.com. And that's M as in Meriwether, T as in Tharp, so mtlawoffice.com.
Okay. And, will you come back soon?
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's very informative. And so, folks, it's really simple. If you have a situation in your family, you need professional help, you need the experts, go to trustdale.com, type the word family law into the search box, or just go down to attorneys, and you can browse by category, and they really do a great job, make a lot of people happy and satisfied in a very difficult situation. We'll see you next time.